Hi everyone, welcome back to our Regcast. Well, today we've stuffed the vendors in a sack and locked them in a small cupboard because we've got the real people talking to you, people who actually do this stuff day to day. Because we're talking about the Royal Mail's cloud migration. Now, this was a huge project. I actually wanted to call this Regcast Squeaky Bum Time, but they wouldn't let me. So, I mentioned it now. And so... Let's just, that's our working title. Because the Royal Mail went through a huge cloud migration, the sort of thing that you've been telling us that you see the risk in, you see the problems with, well, here are the guys that saw the risk and the problem, still went ahead with it anyway. So the question that we're really asking today is, were they geniuses? Or were they crazy people who just got lucky? One thing that you might want to do is, as we're going through, if you feel the urge to type, just type either genius or crazy, depending on what you think. And it's kind of like a rolling poll. It's not quite as statistically reliable as freeform dynamics polls, but this is how I roll. OK, so let's see who we've got on our Regcast today. And so you know me. But the important people today from the Royal Mail, Adrian, welcome to the studio.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
And now, Adrian, you are the head of infrastructure management at the Royal Mail. That's probably quite a lot of infrastructure, isn't it?
It's an awful lot of infrastructure spread across 2,800 sites.
Right, and this is you are basically responsible, the man responsible, if this stuff doesn't work.
Yeah, certainly the life cycle. So anything that's old, it's my job to get it new.
Okay, there's a lot of people have been down on the Royal Mail over the last the last few years, isn't it? I mean, let's people in government and the unions. My mum as well. She's
your mum?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a letter. It's about this big. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I think we've seen it. I think we delivered it.
You've got to see it. I'm not sure you have, mate. All right, now okay. Now and also joining Adrian today from CSC, Glyn. Hello, Glyn.
Hi, how are you doing?
Okay, not too bad. About Glyn, why are you here?
That's a good point. My mother often asks me that. No, we're here because we're the outsourced partner of Royal Mail, and we helped Adrian through his crazy journey out to the cloud. I definitely prefer to talk genius rather than crazy, although there were moments of crazy and enjoying some of Adrian's Alec Ferguson hairdryer sessions. We did think from time to time it was crazy.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, actually. That's terrific. And also from our old mate Freeform Dynamics, it's Dale Vile. Hello, Dale.
Hi, Tim. How you doing?
All right, this is a cracking story, isn't it? Because this is life.
It is a goodie. It is a goodie. A lot of people are going to be interested in this.
Okay, now, the one thing I have to tell you is the important thing, ask some questions. You've got the button to ask the questions. Here are some guys. Actually, from my experience of them, they'll give you a straight answer to an honest question. So why not ask it? Let us know. Also, give us your feedback. The slides, you can download them as PDF as well. Share with your mates. So let's crack on with this. The reason why we are here today is how do you move 30,000 users to the cloud? And it's not just the fact that they moved all these users over to the cloud. You did it in, Adrian, 8 weeks?
8 whole weeks. Well, actually, it was 1 day. 1 day under 8 weeks.
One day under 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, did you just do this because you fancy doing it in 8 weeks, or did you have a deadline?
No, we had a deadline. In the deal we cut with Microsoft and CSC, you've got to stand up an awful lot of resources to do any sort of velocity migration such as this. So therefore, in any standing up of any resources and any type of program, you've got a finite amount of people that you can throw at it. The longer you keep people, the more expensive they move. So therefore, we went for as cheap as possible migration, and that calculated out at 8 weeks.
So basically, if you'd have gone over 8 weeks, what would have happened?
Yeah, we actually had a slippage of up to 12 weeks we were allowed within the programme. So anything up to kind of safe, no extra costs, just a bit more time. But anything over 12 weeks would have run into millions and millions of cost slippage, literally millions.
Literally millions.
Yeah.
Glenn, this is somewhat different to a standard IT project, which goes on until it's finished.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has dates, but if you're missing the date's not uncommon. These things really do have to get finished on time.
Absolutely critical, and I think it's actually one of the benefits of the cloud in that you have to get it nailed as much as you can before you start. A lot of people start and they talk around fixing it as we go, and yes, we'll hit some milestones. It's not the case here. You have to get this absolutely nailed. So one of the things you'll see through the conversation today is nearly all of our time was spent in preparing, getting us to a point where we can hit a big red button and move people effectively and them not raise 20,000 help desk calls on the old service guys. It really is about preparations, key.
Yeah. So it's almost like a new style of IT project, this sort of thing, isn't it? That there's rules you have to follow, there's ways you have to do it, and there's a time that you have to do it in.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a different structure in that, quite a lot of the time on big IT projects, a lot of the critical path is determined by getting the kit in, getting it properly embedded in place, etc. Obviously the emphasis is in a different place with these kinds of projects. What I would say, though, and some of the things that we're going to hear as we go through this discussion, is it's not as if all of that old discipline suddenly disappears when you're working with the cloud. So we're going to be hearing a lot of stuff which is going to be familiar to any big migration project.
Yeah, it's one of those. Actually, there's a question coming in which you're going to have to hold on here. The answer to is about identity management and authentication. That's a huge part of what you're going to say. Yeah. So hold on a few minutes for the answer to that. But first of all, we need to give a little bit of history, a little bit of context here on this. This is the culmination to actually get to 2008 when you started on this project. Leading up to that, there were a lot of bumps in this little road that you've drawn for us. But it started off really with outsourcing your IT department to CSC, didn't it, Adrian?
It did, yeah. 2003, to help Royal Mail stem losses, which were circa £1 billion a year. The IT organisation was outsourced to CSC. So CSC since 2003 has been our partner for everything. So assets, people. About 1,700 people moved over in that deal. Between CSC, BT and Xansa at the time, that's Stereo now. And the first half of that contract was totally focused on cost containment, i.e. make IT as cheap as possible for the Royal Mail so that Royal Mail can return to profit.
Sweat your assets.
Sweat the assets. So we'd come off the back of 2000, little investment after that because we all invested, then into 2003 and further sweat. And that was all the way to 2008, the midpoint of a 10-year contract with CSC.
So you had 1,700 people outsourced. How many retained in the IT
Yeah,
department?
circa 200. Ebbs and flows a little bit 10 either way, but generally 200 were retained to manage CSC, BT and Stereo.
Yeah. Clearly, it's quite a hard job to sweat the scale of the assets that these guys have got and to just keep it going.
Yeah, well, the early days of the contract were not about driving a transformational agenda. It was sweat, and when we sweated it more, sweated a little bit extra. And it really was as hard as that, and getting some of this stuff, that was creaking. I think when we took it up in the early 2000s, it wasn't too bad, but by the time you start getting to 2008, with very little investment in an infrastructure, it's tough to keep up with SLAs. And equally, we've got the moving feast that is the IT marketplace in terms of the people working on the stuff. We're getting more and more IT literate, and they were getting a better work experience, a better IT experience at home than they were at work. It was towards the end that was very, very challenging.
But there is something to say for not changing stuff too much, isn't there?
If it works, it works. I mean, let's face it, if it works, it works. So whilst we're meeting the SLAs to the business, then that's all goodness. But one of the big things for the Royal Mail was around how do they transform their business. So once we got it to a base where we were making profit again, or at least breaking even, how do you then transform that into a growing enterprise away from losing whatever it was, $1 billion a year at the time?
Trouble is with that, Adrian, you end up looking at stuff and you're looking, it's got sort of dust on it and it's a bit broken and, and a lot of stuff, because it hasn't had investment, it's not really, what's it, the Vogue phase, fit for purpose?
Yeah, I mean, for 2008, 2007, 2008, just about fit for purpose. But you could see, if you look back at our service management stats, you could see a gradual increase of availability failures, mean time between failures rising and rising. So when you look back 2007, 2008, the number of SEV1s was persistently increasing to a significant level, which is another indicator of you've sweated far too long. Now's the time for a change to bring the failures down.
We've seen this in general in all the research we've done with the reg readers. It's a bit like stretching an elastic band. You can sort of stretch it and stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, and then there comes a point where it really is strained and your costs start creeping up, and then at some point you pass a threshold, it breaks, and you're knackered, your costs go out of control.
You glue it in the middle.
We've seen
stretch
that.
it a bit further.
Exactly, yeah. All the tricks.
Yeah. It's a question, I mean, it's not strictly relevant, but I'll just put this on since Lee's asked it. So under what sort of terms were people transferred from the Royal Mail to CSC? You actually got transferred out, didn't you?
Yeah. I was part of Royal Mail previously, before I came back again. I moved over, huge deal, £1.5 billion deal, so enormous in scale. typical TUPE, they had a framework within Royal Mail called Managed Surplus Framework, which was all about TUPEing across in the best terms you can. So Royal Mail drove a very hard bargain with CSE at that time to cut that deal where people moved across with very, very, very good terms in reality. So, you know, I enjoyed my time in CSE.
You ended up doing all sorts of other things, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a great time in there. Helped on the national program for the national program for IT, British Aerospace, all sorts of contracts. Yeah, good time.
Yeah.
Pressurised.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can imagine. There's more assets that got sweated.
Yeah. Well, Glyn's only 28.
Yeah, me too, actually, Glyn. Yeah. Okay. Let's let's have a look what we ended up with here, 2008. And on the one hand, this is it looks like all sorts of a mess, Adrian. But on the other, it's not so different to what everybody else has got. Just yours is at a larger scale on a lot of sites.
Yeah, it's like the Fourth Road Bridge desktop infrastructure, as we all know, and a lot of this stuff is, by the time you've started, the size of the number of sites, 2,800 sites and 30,000 people, by the time you start your first one, once you start refreshing and bringing life to it, you've got to start again because the first one you start refreshing is now 3 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem with a lot of Royal Mail's infrastructure. As soon as you start, it's difficult because of the size and scale of it and the number of sites and people and all that. So, but you're right, an awful lot of organisations will sit out there going, well, maybe it's not so bad, maybe you didn't sweat it so much, but believe me, it was really creaking. When you start finding Windows 95 PCs out there, then you start to worry. Which is what we've got.
Some of the problem is also knowing exactly what you've got.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge.
Is this typical then, Dan?
Yeah. I mean, that's just the fact of life, isn't it? With any size of IT infrastructure, but particularly something the size of this. I mean, it just gets more and more fragmented, disjointed, and that creates all kinds of problems. And when it comes to the point where it's starting to actually stop people doing things in terms of running the core business, then you've got to sort of pay attention to it.
That's an absolutely great example. We called it internally Shantytown because it felt like a shantytown, exactly as you just said, Dale. So what we found is when we wanted to bring agility, so from our CEO deciding on a new product or a new initiative, just something like, let me get a video message out to all people that use PCs. We found by the time you create the video package and then you suddenly go, oh, I've got to fix the network. Oh, well, the PC can't take it. Oh, I haven't got enough memory. Oh. So, something simple like that would suddenly turn into a 6 month to a year-long project because you've got to fix 20 layers below it. Mm-hmm. So it was absolutely doing what you're saying.
And you're sort of fixing the stuff for the wrong reasons then. You're fixing it so that the other project can work. Must be demotivating as well.
Yeah, it can be quite soul-destroying because the trouble is, as IT professionals that we are, you don't want the business to perceive you as an overhead or a pain in the backside. You want to see that actually all the hard work and the hours you do are actually beneficial to your organisation as a key aspect. Whereas when you kind of say, well, can we get a video out? Everybody in the world sits at home and watches real-time videos. You can get them on your television.
How hard can it be? Yeah.
Yeah, how hard can it be? Yeah. Well, as soon as you come into a work and you swipe your card in and enter this world, suddenly it's, well, maybe in 6 months with £10 million and with a trailing wind and, crossing your fingers, we might get it out to half.
This is a business you chose to go back into.
Yeah. I'm very proud.
What did you say when you went back in? You didn't want IT to be seen as in the same as HR, finance and legal.
Yeah. It's a very good analogy. You know how bad things have got in your IT sort of career when people put you in the same bucket as finance and HR.
Anyone watching from finance or HR, we're sorry, but they really do mean it. Yeah. No, it's. Also, one thing we're going to talk about later. I'll just put a little stake in the ground for this later. Is you got an internal cloud project going as well. That's also part of this, taking us on from where we were, and we'll deal with that later on. But the main part of what we're going to be talking about is what you did with the desktop apps and the communications and the collaboration and everything like that, which had to be done. Glyn, you take this maybe. What changed in 2008? What snapped that everything had to be redone?
I think more than anything, it was the desire of the business, more than anything, and the attitude to change and transform. So the IT was no different really in 2008 than it was at the end of 2007. It was more around the business of saying, now's the time to start looking at how we transform, because we're not going to be the same Royal Mail in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time. And if we don't do something about this, we're going to be in challenging times. Because, let's face it, I can't remember the exact date, but in probably 2007 you didn't have any competitors.
Can you not remember the exact date?
I can't remember. On purpose, Adrian, I can't remember the exact date. But all of a sudden, Royal Mail find themselves in a competitive world that they weren't in before.
Yeah.
And to add insult to injury, the parts that were being competed were the actual profitable parts of the business. And the parts that where they were losing money, physically sticking something through a letterbox, they were like, we don't, the competition didn't want that.
It's funny no one really wants to compete with that, isn't it? Yeah.
I think the other thing as well, we'd had a change of CIO. So we'd gone from the cost-saving side of it, which was under a CIO called David Burden, through to a transformational CIO, Robin Dark. And that was a catalyst at that time for rebuild, transform.
That's great. We've got questions piling up here, actually, so let's get into what you actually did, because I find this quite interesting. I'm often cynical about people who sort of turn up to this and think, what on earth have they got to say? But I find this really interesting. Now, on the left-hand side of this quite sort of busy chart, the first column here, the stuff you had to do for 12 months, you're saying to me, Adrian, this is fundamental to actually being able to get yourself straight. At this point, when you're doing this sort of modernisation thing, had you made a decision to go cloud, or just to things had to change?
Yeah, things had changed. As you saw on one of the prior slides, when it takes 15 minutes to log your PC on to get to a point where you can actually start using your application, and you've watched half an episode of Bonanza in that 15 minutes and had a chat about Coronation Street, you know you've got to change.
Yeah.
So in reality, we benchmarked with Compass, did some benchmarking work, and we were bottom quartile for productivity,
that's
cost.
not a good place to be.
It was a woeful place. So we know we'd got to draw a line. Now, at that point, we'd not had a decision of cloud. Actually, we'd not got a business case at that point for rejuvenation of core email services and collaboration. So we just knew we'd actually got to modernise the PC that everybody uses, and actually just bring some TLC back to it, to take these dusty old 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old PCs, throw them away and put some new ones in. And just modernise that and everything that underpinned it. Screens, we'd still got in 2008, 2009, we'd still got the big, huge CRT screens, 17-inch, we're still buying them. We weren't putting LCDs out there even, and you look at 30,000 of those burning away constantly as well, it's really old school stuff. So that was all about get to a level. We knew we'd got to make a decision on the collaboration and email and other services, SAP and all sorts of things. So it was all about, well, if we do that now, we can buy ourselves some time to give us a good platform, and then as we make a decision where we want to go with more of the back office, we know that it'll sit across that fairly happily. So the traditional approach would have kind of been where you see a lot of these programs fail, and Dale's right, there's some good and bad, and there's also some new way, agile way of working, and also some traditional is. The traditional approach would have been to put all these things in one bucket and create one monolithic of a program and sign it off at the board, and then struggle and fail, because we're trying to do everything at once. So what we did is, no, let's go for a 2.5, 3 year transformation, sort the basics out, land it. Not talk about landing it, actually just get on and do it. It's not sexy. Because if you look at that timescale, so I'm sure somebody's emailing in saying, so why did you go with XP? Because in 2008, OK, we got Vista. That's the reason we didn't go for it.
I hadn't even spotted that. Yeah, you didn't go for Vista.
No, we left Vista behind.
Dale quite likes Vista, actually, don't you?
Sure he does.
I used to. I was one of the... What was it? No, let's not go there.
let's not go there.
So, yeah, strong foundation.
Yeah. But that's it. And at this point, you're doing basically a 12-month programme where no one's really going to notice much of a difference, except the people who know what's inside and behind things.
Kind of, but you've got to imagine a PC or a laptop is quite emotive to people. So when we embarked on that real simplistic thing, if you've got a 6, 8-year-old PC, 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, some people to boot, messy. Yeah. Suddenly we turn up with an awful lot of brand new kit that they've never seen in almost a decade, and we put it on the desk, and it's surprising how enthusiastic people get for kit that's actually slightly this, millennium. And actually these people, it really raised the stakes of, oh, look, we can see IT doing it. Because actually if you imagine there you're in some small office in Royal Mail, very difficult job, lots of competition, and IT are not doing anything for you or perceived to doing anything, you're working on old things that take forever, that actually, at home, you're getting PCs that are 2 or 3 years old, at most.
Yeah.
So you're using super fast kit at home, and then you're coming in again, swipe the card, look at this old stuff we're using here. So we rock up with an awful lot of new kit, modernise it all, standardise it all, generally people feel an awful lot happier, because it's perceived as theirs. It's not, but it is.
Yeah. What's the hard work that has to be done at the back end of this? Glenn, you take this one.
For me, it's all so preparation's key, but the biggest killer is around authentication.
Yeah.
And having a single version of the truth.
Interesting. This was the first question we got in.
I mean, it's just across everybody, and you know, we're working on multiple Microsoft Cloud programs right now, and it's the number one thing we're doing across the piece. And actually, Royal Mail were reasonably lucky, skillful, whatever you want to call it, genius or crazy, I don't know.
Genius or crazy?
Yeah, but you only had like two
Remember what you've heard so far: genius or crazy.
Genius.
Genius or crazy.
Genius. You only had really 2 authentication platforms.
Yeah.
So consolidating them into a single version of the truth was relatively easy.
What did you consolidate down to?
Well, Active Directory is...
Active Directory, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of the Active Directory move is over the years we'd mushroomed up to, you know, a relatively huge number of Active Directory domain controllers. We've got 360 domain controllers, which in itself was causing a phenomenal amount of problems. When Microsoft best practice was saying about a dozen, maybe 30 or 40 at most, depending on your sites and your WAN. So part of that Active Directory consolidation down as our authentication was also rationalise, stabilise. You know, in 2000, I think it was 2007, we'd had a 2-3 day outage because Active Directory got so legacy, you know, on the entire AD that Microsoft and CSC had to help solve. That hit our entire desktop suite and our server back end. So we drove that program out the back of that and reaped the benefits on this piece.
This is the normal sort of, this is how complexity gets out of control, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think there's a huge principle here as well. I mean, we just get stuff shoved down our throats about cloud being this magic bullet, and you know, you can just sort of move everything to the cloud and magically all your IT problems go away, which is actually total nonsense, isn't it? And I mean, we're hearing some examples of this, and it's a bit like... you know, you look at a lot of the cloud services out there, we're talking about high-end stuff here, but a lot of the readers are sort of medium-sized companies and stuff, and they'll be looking at second-tier providers, you know, not people like CSC necessarily. A lot of these guys, you know, you have to set up a totally parallel authentication system, identity management system. Then you've got a huge management problem. You put a couple of those things
your authentication here, and you've got a different management.
You've got in-house, you've got authentication for this service, and then potentially you've got authentication for this service, and they're all different. And now you've got to try and keep this stuff in sync. Now, obviously, it's intact. You know, it's not even possible to think about it with this kind of scale of operation. But it's just a general principle even that you need to think of.
Even for a smaller organisation, you're saying that this is going to impact very badly forever.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we see repeatedly, no matter what the size of the organisation is, because the business tends to hold a budget, and this promise of the new world of cloud computing, they get taken along on the hype, and they'll start buying services from providers out in the cloud without IT even knowing about it. True. And all of a sudden, the authentication of your enterprise is out in the cloud somewhere else. So if you try and consolidate, you end up with even more versions of the truth. We've got customers who've got 10 and 12 and 14 versions of the truth of who their people are out there, and that's a challenging place to recover.
Exactly, and I don't want to detract too much from Adrian's story, but I mean, there are some general principles that fall out as well, like this preparation idea. That doesn't, you know, it's not any different with the cloud, and we come across this not just in terms of authentication and identity management, but also in terms of data. I mean, if you're moving from 3 or 4 on-premise systems, you want to consolidate into a single cloud system, you've got to get your data sorted out. I mean, it's not necessarily that big a deal with an email system, but it is if it's ERP or CRM or any other kind of application.
Yeah.
So, I mean, prep, the basic message here is
the
prep.
One thing I would add on top of that, though, in terms of cloud, and Adrian talked about, you know, the way you kick off in a normal project, and Dale saying it's very similar. The one difference with cloud is that there's an absolute, in that you can't bastardize, I think was the word they used. You can't bastardize your service. So Microsoft say, we will deliver A, B, and C. You can't say, can I have a little bit of D as well, because our business is different. No, you've got A, B, and C.
Right, so when you got the big cloud provider, they basically say, it's, you know, we want world peace our way.
Quite right. Yeah. It's exactly what you got, you know, with the Microsoft guys now, and it's, you know, it's not even in the small print, it's in the large print. When you sign up to these things is, you're getting phenomenal agility once you're on. You're getting great cost, you know, in terms of cost relief and flexibility. All the big benefits of the cloud, you know, and availability, because you're instantly getting DR and everything. But the flip side is you lose an element of control. Yeah. You know, I could say to these guys on Lotus Notes, and probably did in my previous stint, is actually, guys, put that piece of fax software on that server. I don't care. I'll underpin any SLA, and because they're a service provider, they'll do it.
But do you lose control? I think maybe look at it in a slightly different way. I mean, the Reg readers have told us on a lot of occasions before, if you get them at a point, you're talking about implementing some kind of new system, and you say, what would you do differently, whether it's ERP, CRM, or whatever. We've done all that kind of stuff before with Reg readers. And the one big thing they would do differently is not customise the hell out of it.
Absolutely.
Because they've lost control because of the customisation. So I think it's kind of a bit of an illusion.
No, that's a good point. There's a big difference, though, between, you're right, about you wouldn't customise. The trouble is it's like anybody, isn't it? If you've got the ability to customise under your power, you know, and it could be the influence with the service provider or direct, because you've not outsourced, so you own the techies, when you're getting pressure from a CIO or a CEO or a departmental head to solve it, might have just took an outage, might want some new functionality. There's a big difference between I cannot change that physically because of my contract with Microsoft or any of the cloud vendors, because that's the deal, versus I can, but I shan't.
I don't really want to, because it's going to... And it gets back to your sort of thing that you're providing the video, and then you can't provide the video because of this, so you do a little bit of a kludge here and a little bit of this, and you stick this together, and then it's stuck together forever, and you manage it.
Yeah, for 6 or 7 years, you know, one of those kludges, tweaks a year, suddenly 6 or 7, 8 in, and the product looks different. Well,
let's get this. Let's fix this. Then you finished your 12 months in 2009. You then have to work out what you do next with this, because this is what everyone's asking about. Why did you do the cloud? Why did you go to Microsoft? Especially because a lot of your email at that point was not on a Microsoft system. You were running Lotus Notes. So what was up for the decision then?
Oh, we'd got all on-prem flavours. So that is stay with Lotus Notes, which we were on.
We'd actually run it yourself in-house.
Well, run it.
Right, yes, they run it themselves.
Yeah. So you've got to remember, we've got all these versions of Lotus Notes, so we've got half a dozen different versions or so. So that was an option. In many ways, that was the easy option and the safest option. The other one was go to an on-prem version of Exchange.
Yeah.
Big player, you know, because we like the Microsoft.
That's what a lot of people have got,
Absolutely.
Run it yourself.
We'd then got the options of potentially a IBM/Lotus hosted version by Lotus or a partner.
Out to the cloud, stick with Lotus Notes.
We've got the BPOS product offering that was just starting to appear mainstream.
Early days at that point.
Very early. Only 3 clients had signed up to it, you know, which was Coca-Cola and Energizer, etc. And then clearly what we've got is we've got to look across all those different products. We've got Google Apps as well, was sat in there as well in the mix.
That was just getting going at that time,
Yeah, there was a lot of marketing noise, let's say, around the Google stuff. You know, because it was in the consumer space very heavily, and I think they got a couple of early wins of a few sort of SME organisations. So we laid all those out, along with the legacy we've got to move from, because that's the phenomenal cost. How do we move from this world, where we're currently in, all the way over to this kind of promise?
That's the thing, because it's not just what you would like it to be, it's a question of how you start, how you get the stages along the way.
Correct.
Because you can't shut down for 6 months.
No, you've got to land it. It's like anything. The first phase we landed. Wasn't perfect, dramatically better. So in the next phase was, you've got to land it again. You can talk about it forever, which a lot of people are doing with cloud, talking and talking and talking, suddenly a year's gone, we're still talking. So with this one, it was, how do we move? What are the factors? So we've got all these product sets in front of us, and hybrids and all sorts of things, and then we've got cost, and then we've got the legacy. And we've got to put all those into the mix and spit out, let's make a decision.
OK, so simplify it down for me. How did you make the decision?
I would say the BPOS product was lagging. So as we were moving through our analysis, looking at Lotus Notes, how could you move? How could you convert a Lotus Notes world over to a Microsoft world? Microsoft were bringing the tools out.
Oh, here we are. Here's something new that's in the cloud that no one's actually moving, but maybe you'd like to move the whole of the Royal Mail to it. You have to be crazy.
A little bit of that.
Crazy.
Yeah, kind of. And I would say that an on-prem Microsoft solution looked the best fit. In terms of, we liked the new products, we'd not got instant messaging, we've got a really legacy version of SharePoint. So there's a better fit for the Microsoft toolset than there was a Lotus going forward. We'd not spent a lot of time standardising Lotus Notes. It had become heavily bastardised beyond belief. So it was always, a move to the new Lotus product was going to be just as hard as a move to the Microsoft one. So actually, when you sit there and compare them, it's just a cost issue then. Because we couldn't just slip the Lotus products into the new versions, because it just wouldn't have worked. So therefore it became much more of a, let's look at the Microsoft product. Right, on-prem was the absolute banker, because we could stick it in these guys' data centre and say, your problem, your data centre, your LAN, just munge the data overnight, please.
Give us this service. This is, you know what you're expecting. You've been doing this all your career. These sort of things. Standard for your clients.
Absolutely. We get asked 9 times out of 10 in terms of migration, just move it one version to the next version, keep a hold of it, don't really do anything different.
Got Active Directory sorted out, it's going to be... OK, so that's the obvious, sensible answer. So you didn't do that?
Yeah, no, we shot the Google one quite early. because it didn't feel enterprise ready, even though the cost was phenomenally, attractive. When we felt that, should we have a problem, who would you ring? And it was very difficult then that we felt that the Active Directory integration wasn't really there.
They put a lot of investment in the last couple of years into that.
Yeah, and I think it's mature.
2009, yeah.
Correct. So it wasn't, for us, we discounted it quite early through those technical reasons and the sit with the Royal Mail world. So the thing that really changed us and swung us more to a BPOS product was it took us about 6 months to do the analysis all the way through these various options. And the BPOS product motored in that period. They'd onboarded another 12, 15 clients, big blue-chip clients like GlaxoSmithKline, Nokia, etc. So some huge organisations coming on. And also we'd hit this thing called recession, properly square in the face. And that's when cloud came into its fore, because everything was cost, agility, downsize, cut cost, and cut more cost. So we'd gone from this route of a traditional licensing model with Microsoft or any of the big providers was buy 30,000 cows. Go out, spend 30,000, high watermark. As we know with all deals, you can't scale them down, you can only scale them up. It's always the high watermark. We got it where we knew we were going to downsize our organisation like everybody in the world. Suddenly BPOS, from a risk-averse Royal Mail organisation, propelled itself into pole position by quite a considerable margin. Yes, there were risks and cloud and all the spin with it, but the reality of being able to actually upsize and downsize your organisation month on month, so as we come out the back of recession and grow again, we can upscale month on month. As we hit recession again, you go down month on month. So that was incredibly compelling for us in terms of cost. We'd got to contrast the cost-based issue with the risk of moving to cloud was the only dilemma.
Yeah. How did you feel about this one, Glyn? Because you stand to lose quite a lot on this, don't you?
In one respect, I guess you could see that we do, but in general we don't. So we were heavily involved in actually creating the business case with Adrian's team.
You were involved from the beginning on this.
Yeah, right from the beginning. Yeah. So we were fully on board. And one of the important things for us was making sure that we were partnering with an organisation like Microsoft, which we've partnered with for many years, but typically in on-premise solutions or hosted in a CSC data centre. And we need to be truly confident that if we were going to drive to this new world, and it was the first ever one for CSC worldwide, we want to do it with a trusted partner.
This was the first time you'd done this as well?
Absolutely. This was the first ever partner-led cloud service globally on a Microsoft platform.
You two must have been very unrelaxed at this point.
Squeaky bum time, I think, is what you,
I wasn't going to say it again, but now it's out there, yeah. For you, was it different? Because you're working with a different bunch of people in Microsoft.
Very different. Very different.
What changed then? Were they more helpful, less helpful?
It's a mix. I mean, it generally is a mix. It is a totally different world inside Microsoft. And one of the interesting things that people view Microsoft as this one entity, and they're not. There are lots and lots of separate...
All arguing like cats in a bag. No,
potentially.
But I mean, it's true. You're dealing with a different bunch of people. And these are people that are very motivated to get the business in. But there must have been a doubt that they could actually make it work.
Yeah, so our doubts were not about the products. Products are great. Products are fantastic. The service. They don't do service. They don't fully understand service. I think they've made massive leaps in the last 18 months, 12, 24 months. Yeah. But what CSC understand more than anything else is service and how to deliver a service to the business. So actually, we're not as emotional about do we run Exchange in our data centre versus does it sit in a Microsoft data centre. How do we deliver the right service to the Royal Mail for a business? That's where our core expertise and value lies with. And where Adrian's coming from, he doesn't want to hear about Exchange and roles and all of that kind of stuff. He wants to know how we're going to impact his user, how we're going to impact the business, where we're going to add value, are we going to deliver what we say we're going to deliver? And that's where we add the value around this.
So, Adrian, when you're making the decision on this and you go into your CIO and saying, actually, no, what we're not going to do is the obvious thing that you assume that we were going to do, and we were going to do it up to last week. What we're actually going to do is we're going to shunt it all over to Microsoft and they're going to run it for us. They haven't done it before. A couple of years ago, they'd never actually done this sort of thing, but I think it's going to be terrific. That's quite a hard sell, I would have thought.
It is. Luckily, we got quite a charismatic, flamboyant CIO at the time who was transformational. And with any type of transformational, you can sit in the dark or the shade and kind of do the traditional. Or you can actually say, OK, you've got the backing of Microsoft, we've got Balmer making noises and the entire board about we're all in. And it was very clear, talking to Microsoft execs at that level, that this was a sea change in their organisation, which now, in the cold light of day in 2011, we can all see. Back in 2009, early doors of 2009, it was only a faint glimmer. So luckily our CIO was absolutely bought into it 100% in terms of leading that change from the front.
And at this time, a couple of questions already popped in on this. What SLAs were they offering you?
SLAs are great, and Glyn's already smiling on this one. the one mandate from Royal Mail was, by using our partner CSC, we wanted the same SLAs. We didn't need a faster fixed time, a greater availability, whether it was 4 nines, 5 nines, 3 nines, it was irrelevant to us. We just wanted what we had on Lotus Notes, because remember, it was pretty rock solid, it was getting more flaky, but our SLAs were being achieved. Actually, that's good enough for what in effect is a postal carrier and a letter carrier, a logistics organisation. We're not in the military, we're not in the health world. So for us, it was, please take our current SLA CSC and you negotiate them, because you've got to remember, Royal Mail has no contract with Microsoft. It was resold through CSC.
Right.
So these guys sat in the middle with me doing the same hairdryer treatment.
You're doing the hairdryer on one end,
And these guys getting the problem of negotiating with Microsoft and agreeing internally of what SLAs. Ultimately, I just said, same SLAs apply, please, because they're good.
And what happens if those SLAs were not met? Who would you'd be on the phone to Glyn, and he'd have to cough up to you.
Yeah, they're exactly a service provider.
And so you had to put the pressure on Microsoft.
Absolutely,
to say,
we've got to change our attitude to contracting and risk. And you'll see, I think on the next slide we've got a timeline of this. And one of the longest periods was around the contract negotiations.
All doing this and pushing them.
Absolutely, legal teams. You get lots of legal teams in a room together, and they'll whip their bills up as high as they can for as long as they can to get this stuff sorted out.
Yeah, and enjoy it all the time while they're doing it. And it's. But here's the thing as well. It's the big provider sort of thing for this, Dale, isn't it? That you go down to sort of Microsoft and you say, we'd like this SLA, please, and Microsoft's known that we offer this SLA.
Yeah, we're actually running some research on the site at the moment, and I've been looking at some of the preliminary results of that, and what reg readers are still telling us, apart from security being the biggest concern, is provider trust is a pretty big thing. And I find it quite interesting that one of the other things, I've been nosing around looking at the data, and there's a big correlation between people who are comfortable with outsourcing in general and have existing partners and their tendency to go towards cloud options. And I think that's because if you already have a trusted partner, like CSC in this case, then that kind of takes the edge off some of these trust issues. And the trust isn't necessarily, you're worried about them being dishonest. It's, as you were saying, Microsoft isn't necessarily thought of as a professional services organisation. It hasn't done some of these things before, so someone needs to risk that.
Also, you can't. If you're a cloud provider, you can't, because you offer a service that's based around, one data centre.
So let me tell you, I think it's even more fundamental than that. For a lot of the product providers, and Microsoft, as I said before, do great products, but they are that. So if you look at a BPOS dashboard, it might show green across the board. We call them watermelon metrics, because they're green on the outside, but very, very red on the inside. and so Exchange might be up, SharePoint might be up, Link might be up, but the provisioning service might not be up. Now, to us, as a service provider, that means services down, services red. But to a cloud provider of product, they'll say, well, our products are up.
It's all fine,
Absolutely. And this is where it's really important that you get the service wrap absolutely spot on with this. So it's absolutely critical. We can make up for some of the gaps that Adrian's expecting at Royal Mail and the products that are being delivered down the pipe to us as a partner. So I think it's really important to have that service wrap.
Intimacy.
That's
what's vital here. Is the piece Microsoft are really good at is products. They're really good at availability. The BPOS product works superbly well. 100% availability on most products since we went live. What Microsoft will never know for years, if they ever get there, because they're not in that territory, is that the 28th of February or the 15th of March is a key day for Royal Mail, because we have something happening in our org, either financially or in terms of the organisation. These guys do, because they've forged an intimate partnership with us. So therefore what these guys can do is translate those business events and pressures. Could be we have a period of instability in our main services. So these guys can feed it into Microsoft, boil it down and say, please, 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 no changes on the BPOS product, because if we have another outage, we're in trouble. And actually that type of intimacy, if you imagine what cloud's doing for Royal Mail, is I don't want to care about CPU anymore. I've got enough. Everything I do needs to be around how do we get posties more optimal? How do we get parcel carrying cheaper? Core things that make Royal Mail work, and actually underpin it and be there for the business. PC commodity stuff, email commodity stuff has got nothing to do with what I should do every day. I should be worrying about all those optimisations in hundreds of thousands of people that work. So actually by giving it these and going, my business, get on with it, and you deal with these people over there, and I just want it like a light switch or a table. I just want email there and collaboration there, and it's expected. Get on with it.
Dale, so it's a quick answer on this one. We're dealing with this one, and Adrian's making a good case for why working with CSC was really useful. Not everyone's going to be of the scale where they have someone like CSC on call or can get their attention. What about the guys that are working directly with the providers, the Microsofts and the Googles?
Okay, well, two things really. One of them is on the contract SLA side, you don't always have the luxury of the scale that you guys have to negotiate that. So your only real defence is to make sure you really bloody well understand what's in that contract before you actually sign it, because if you're going to go through a long implementation cycle, particularly, which even for smaller businesses, this is quite a lot of investment they're going to make, you're going to be having to live with that for a while. So you've got to understand those SLAs, how change is managed, all those kind of things.
Liability, what happens if the whole of email died, and it doesn't come back ever?
Absolutely.
The lawyers are always very interested in that question.
So there's got to be lawyers involved, even if there's no, if there's no CSC involved, there's got to be lawyers involved who understand that.
It depends on the contract, doesn't it? I mean, the contracts vary so massively. Some of them are actually very consumer-orientated. I mean, it's frightening, actually, the number of services that have come out of consumer land and are now targeted at small businesses, and none of the T's and C's and service levels and everything else have actually migrated with it. The other thing, though, is I think normally, even a sort of medium-sized business, you would look for help when you're implementing something. And I think, again, there's this misconception that cloud, somehow you can bypass the usual implementation cycle. You would normally go to a local reseller, VAR, systems integrator. Even smaller companies do this, even if it's just a guy on a trading estate. And I think this is one of the big gaps with the whole cloud thing at the moment, is that a lot of those guys aren't today necessarily on board with the cloud thing. So, that's a market level discussion. But if you're actually going down that route, it's worthwhile just finding someone who knows what they're doing to work with you.
Yeah, I think that's critical. So small, medium businesses, absolutely, which is why people like Microsoft do have a channel specifically for online. Because they could look at it and say, hang on, you're killing my business by taking my hosting or my on-premise revenues away. But a lot of those have reskilled into what does it mean to drive cloud services, and their value actually moves up the cycle. So they get involved much earlier in the deployment cycle than maybe they would.
Take something really simple like SharePoint, for instance. I mean, it looks like a utility commodity type play, but actually out of the box, it doesn't really do very much.
It doesn't do anything.
That's the worst you can do.
So someone's got to work with you to set...
Okay, yes. Now I need to talk to you about the deployment here. This is the real squeaky bum time, because you got to the point where you can push the red button.
Yeah.
I'm working for Royal Mail. What do I see that's going to be different? Who's preparing me for this? What happens? So Adrian, what did you do for these guys? Especially seeing as you're the man who, if this goes wrong, has to answer his phone once every 5 seconds for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you do?
You prepare like a demon. And what you do is in the preparation phase, which is on there in blue on the slide, is the vital part of that is use that time wisely. Now, you might say, well, actually it took 24, 25 weeks to prepare. The reality of that time is why, cloud-based services, there is an element of myth. It's not just buy it. Microsoft did two products in this space. One's a multi-tenant version, otherwise known as BPOS S, and we went for BPOS D, which was a dedicated infrastructure for Royal Mail. Now, that's stand-up, but there isn't just a load of kit lying around for lots of clients like Royal Mail. It has to be provisioned, set up properly. An awful lot of data has to be collated.
You can actually point to a server somewhere in a Microsoft data centre and say the Royal Mail.
We know it's in Amsterdam and Dublin, that's all we know. And that's all I care about, if truthfully now. But we knew they were built for us, dedicated for us, segmented, which helped stem a lot of the security and legal questions, awfully did. Now, in that 24 weeks while Microsoft spent setting it up, bearing in mind this is out to Amsterdam and Dublin, we wanted dedicated network links into Microsoft's data centre as opposed to going over the internet.
Right, yeah, of course.
New clients can go over the internet. At that time, it was dedicated MPLS links. They take 6 months to provision because they're international. So we got these big network links going into Microsoft data centres with DR capability. We used that time hugely to prepare Royal Mail people. So I left these guys to say, all that Lotus Notes creaky world, and Microsoft, all the shiny, kind of nice new world, play nice, please, together. Go away in a corner and just make it happen. Millions and millions and millions of meetings, it felt like, and lots of head banging in a room, and I was involved in some of it, but I generally let these guys get on with the technical detail. From a client perspective, I spent the 24, 26 weeks with my team readying the Royal Mail people about what cloud is. Why are we changing? What will it? What will
This
make
is not
a
an
difference?
IT sophisticated audience.
No, this is a mixture. You've got everybody from power users all the way down to occasional, users who aren't fast on the keyboard. A lot of you guys go into delivery offices in Royal Mail when you get the card and say, look, you push this card through and think, can you give me my parcel or my letter? Actually, PCs are using those offices by people who use them occasionally, who aren't fast typists. So you've got a spectrum of people, CEO all the way down. And we've got to educate that entire workforce about why. Why are we changing what is perceived as email? And actually let that audience know that there's trust. Because actually, as I said earlier, that organisation hadn't got a huge amount of trust in IT programs. We'd had a lot of programs that hadn't gone superbly well. A lot of IT programs in most orgs don't go well. So this organisation was saying the one thing that does work regularly is email, and you're about to break it, aren't you?
And did you give them an actual date and a time at which you're about to break their email?
Yeah. There's a superb piece of work, and it's part of the innovation that the CSC did with us and Microsoft. Generally, if any of you guys say, Tim, we're moving to the cloud, we came and said, in 3 weeks you're moving on a Friday night. It's quite a cumbersome way it has been for clients to onboard across onto the cloud, onto the Microsoft world. So what we did is we created a web portal. Actually, we had our own dog food in SharePoint. We created a SharePoint, very graphical look and feel, that took people through the journey. It's all part of the culture of trusters, and we'll move you into that world. And it allowed people to choose and book when they wanted to go, as opposed to a traditional way of doing things in IT, which is you're going on Thursday night. Well, actually, Thursday night's not convenient for you. So what we worked with is some change experts in the industry, psychology people, who could say, right, how are you going to make this stick? Because if all you're doing is changing the Lotus products to a Microsoft product, the culture that lives behind that and wanting to do more cloud in future, you've got to change hearts and minds for people to adopt this. So a huge amount of effort. I spent 90% of my time with some of my great people who are in Chesterfield working on a change programme around Royal Mail people, keeping these guys as far away from my clients as possible, and also keeping these guys, me keeping them away, going, I don't want to talk techie either.
Well, you're busy during this time, Glenn. You've got sort of like huge mail databases and things like that. Yeah. You're all squeezing them down into one and ready for then that to be sort of shot off to Microsoft.
Yeah, consolidating as much as we possibly can and looking at, so we talked about a single version of the truth on authentication. Yeah. But don't forget that we also find about 9,000 Lotus Notes applications in the estate, which are critical, which are, if we turn them all off, who's going to shout the loudest, what part of the business is going to fall down? And you go back and ask some of those questions to the business and they're saying, well, I don't know what 6,500 of those actually do.
Right, okay.
So we had a lot of work of what's really critical, what do we need to move, what do we need to leave and coexist whilst we're doing this. So we've got a fallback. So if this whole new world does go down, we can flick a switch and everybody's back on plan B, which is, as you were, we'll work this through again. So really important to have all that absolutely nailed.
And so during this time, during this 8 weeks, though, your squeaky bum time, then half of the people that are in the organisation are moved to the new stuff, half the people on the old stuff, they still have to send email to each other and do the same jobs as they were always doing. What do you do about that?
Superb piece of, several things. Superb piece of technology that Microsoft have partnered with by a company called Binary Tree. And you get the product for a year, coexistence for a year. Sits right in the middle. Sits in the middle of a Lotus Notes and an Exchange world, cloud and an on-premise Lotus Notes. And it sits there, and it's in effect a glorified router, you could track it as, or a gateway. And it knows, because you feed it with your schedule, of which users are now cloud, i.e. on Exchange. So what happens is it intercepts and sits in the middle of your Notes world and also your Exchange world. So, as Glyn sat there on his BlackBerry on Lotus Notes in the old world, and I'm nice and happy in nice new cloud land on my BlackBerry, when he looks for free time busy to book an appointment with me, it just seamlessly goes through because this piece of technology... Now, clearly, that's kind of glossed it up. A lot of trials and tribulations getting that working. She's got a dozen different Lotus Notes versions and 3 dozen servers on-prem. And you've got this nice new shiny cloud where you've got to tune that thing to work in your org. And that probably took us in the planning phase and the early adopter phase in the first week, took us a good week and a half to get working to the level where we were happy.
Yeah. But without it, you'd have been stuffed.
Totally stuffed. And I think one of the important points for your register readers is around it's no different that it's Lotus Notes. Yeah. It's exactly the same in the Exchange world. So if you've got a big Exchange estate, you still need to coexist. And the fact that, in theory, they're the same product, in reality, they're not. So they don't just talk to each other immediately. You need a period of coexistence for two reasons. One, you're going to have half your users on one platform and half on the other. And two, for your disaster recovery plan B, where do I flick the switch to go back if this all stuff doesn't work?
See, because I'm a non-technical person. Don't come on, look shocked. And it's like, and I would have thought that would not have been, for instance, if it was exchange to exchange, I would have not thought that would have been a significant piece of work, but it is.
Yeah, absolutely critical.
And remember, when most people are going through an exchange migration anyway, if they're going from on-premise to cloud, chances are they're coming from a fairly old version of Exchange to a new one.
So even if it wasn't a Microsoft Notes to Exchange at the same time, if it's just Exchange premise, Exchange cloud, then you're saying
all this preparation work still needs to be done. I mean, there's arguably less, and particularly in smaller organisations where you don't have the application portfolio that you have around Notes. But
it's bandwidth. You know, we put one of the first slides up about Royal Mail was bandwidth challenge. So in the slipstream of this happening in the background was huge wide area network upgrades for Royal Mail.
I'm going to say you're going to have to do it because even if you've got the dedicated lines going out to the data centres, still within your couple of thousand locations.
Yeah.
You need
so
to
Tim,
invest
if you're
in
moving
network.
tonight, you know, or we planned out 42 days in advance. So T-minus 42, when you cut over as an individual, we've already done the calc to say you've got a 1 gigabyte of email. Well, actually, when we cut you over and you come in, when you've cut over and you type in, you know, Tim, and you log on, all that happens now in our new world was your Lotus Notes icon greyed out and you just had an Outlook icon appeared. You double-clicked. You, in effect, are pulling down a gigabyte of traffic for one person.
Yeah.
You take a 4 megabyte pipe, a 10 megabyte pipe, 100 meg, you've got 1,000 people on that site. You've got a slow response, probably for 3 solid days. So we had to work with these guys and BT, our network provider, to actually calculate where our bandwidths, in each individual, where our bandwidth contention would be, and deal with it and precede it days and days and days in advance.
So at what point during this migration did you know that this was not a career-ending decision?
Week 3, very visible. So week 3 of 8, absolutely glide path. Knew at that point. You get that feeling in your water. Either somebody's kicked you to pieces and you're aching, or you think, we're going to pull it off. So week 3, definitely. What I would say is week 1 of proper migrations, we knew. If you imagine the scenario, these guys have cut me over, but they've cut me over with people bringing in velvet cushions of laptops on them going, see, your email's live on the cloud. A bit of smoke and mirrors, but I was live. So if you imagine the first 500 day 1, so this is where it all comes together, this planning of amazing client experience of you log on and it appears by magic. That's all some effort somebody had to do. So we moved the first 500. So there's that moment on those 500 when we're all in at 5:30, 6 o'clock, waiting for the masses in Royal Mail to come. So the first 500 came, 8:30 came, 9 o'clock, nothing. Absolutely quiet. So in my water was, no, this doesn't happen, this type of slick move, therefore it's not worked. So it's all back to Lotus Notes. So we had to ring the help desk persistently that these guys run for us going, any calls? No, normal. Right, any about email? No, normal. And then we had to ring 10% to 15% of that user base, say, is everything okay? Because we've not heard anything.
You think of a problem for us, please?
Yeah, well, we're thinking...
We genuinely thought it hadn't worked. We genuinely thought
Absolutely.
the big red button hasn't worked because nobody's called.
This will only happen once in your careers. It's never been this good again.
And in many ways, it was good because actually nobody was calling, so nobody was screaming saying it's broken.
Yeah.
People had just reverted back, which was plan B, into Notes. But absolutely every single person that first day had moved over and the icon appeared like normal, the email's there, it did what it said on the tin, thanks. Which was the best compliment. So huge anticlimax for us by 9:30 when we realised, it's happened, and that was it. Now,
it's not a bad sort of anticlimax, though. You could do with a few more of those anticlimaxes, really, in your life, couldn't you?
We could, and we had a few trials and tribulations the following weeks, but, nothing of any size.
Yeah. Let's just have a quick look at the outcomes on this here. So you finished early and under budget.
Yep.
You didn't lose any data?
No data.
You didn't lose any at all?
No. Zero.
Nice work, Glenn. The people who are moving here, he says 750 people move in a day.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we get and 3,200 on one day. That was a big day at the work.
Yeah,
office,
huge one. If you look at it, Microsoft now, I think it was Nokia, they move 14,000 in one day.
Yeah.
So the velocity is going up all the time as Microsoft get more familiar.
They get more familiar with it. That's the thing. Yeah.
But when we did 3,200, Microsoft were telling us you could probably do 300 or 400 a day, but don't risk it. Don't go any harder.
We did it on
faster.
bank holiday, similar to what we're going to get.
You wait till Microsoft weren't looking, and then you stuff.
Pretty much over a weekend, bank holiday weekend. Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
But I think
these are interesting tips about how to work with Microsoft. It's glad they let you come here without adult supervision, isn't it? Nice. Now, guys, tell me a little bit. We've got a few minutes left. Tell me about what you're doing with HyperV and your data center
Yeah,
cloud?
we did it in parallel. It started a little bit earlier, so we started in sort of mid-2008. HyperV sat there as our virtualization layer, so we've got it there sat in the CSC data center. And it's been so beneficial to this program, to the BPOS move, because what it's allowed us to do is anybody that's looking to go to the cloud knows that Microsoft's recommendation, certainly for SharePoint, is hybrid, because any product in the cloud at the moment isn't equivalent, nearly, but not quite equivalent to an on-premise solution.
Right, because SharePoint's really big in in what you're planning to do in the future.
SharePoint is absolutely centre place. Now, email should be, but what we see now is SharePoint will be centre place along with other collaboration elements like the instant messaging part. So our world now is starting to, in terms of collaboration, we've eradicated the word SharePoint, and we're just calling it collaboration, because what we don't want it to be is you go to our portal and it doesn't look like SharePoint. And the reason we've done that is because we've kind of got a hybrid. We've got the cloud base, and we use it wherever we can, and we've got on-premise, which is on HyperV. So we can spin up lots of versions of SharePoint in 2010, 2007. The benefit to having this abstracted, non-looking SharePoint portal that it's powered is that allows us to move stuff seamlessly in and out of the cloud. So as if the cloud gets upgraded and it's not quite working quite right, we can bring it back on-prem without the user base knowing. So it's an abstraction layer for us. Without Hyper-V, we couldn't have done that. We'd have had to stand up 20, 30 servers. Now we just spin up 20, 30 VMs, test it, take it down, take it up. There's hundreds of other servers on there from legacy line of business apps and things like that.
Is it a cost-saving thing as well?
Yeah, it's saved. We anticipate it save 1.8 million over a few years, but it's the agility it gives us now. You know, we're now literally in the next 2 weeks we get our first virtual desktops stood up on that. So first proper use of VDI and RDS and things like that, all the Microsoft technologies.
What do you do for during the rest of your time off and anything like that?
He doesn't do sports activity. You get enough excitement at work, so home life is calm.
You don't like it easy, do you? No.
Football and Kylie. That's my life.
You can come back and tell us about how all this is going, but it's a lot of these things would seem to be very high risk for a business that's perceived as extremely low risk.
Yeah.
Did you do this because you like living dangerously, or did you do it because you're forced into it?
No, certainly not forced into it. Robin, our CIO at the time, set the agenda. You know, you've got to be brave, you've got to be bold. If you tinker on the edges, you look at Royal Mail is declining, its revenues are declining, its mail volumes 10% year on year, 10%. So we used to deliver 80 million letters. You know, we're probably down to 65 million. You know, so every year we're losing 10% of that. It's not hitting the revenue 10%, but the only reason it's not hitting the revenues 10% is we're making cost-based efficiencies. So if we tinker at the edges on anything we do, which is what our CIO taught us, if we tinker, it's not bold enough. Yeah. So if you're not bold enough, you're actually making the position worse. So you've got to make these huge, bold statements and these huge, bold moves to have any inroad and any chance of actually keeping the decline minimal.
Got it. Now, we got to wrap up in about a minute or so, or something like that. So what I want from you guys each is one thing. If there's one real thing, because there's a lot of stuff that's come out on this that isn't in the normal let's all go to the cloud debate, which is, which you pointed out before, Dale, very simplistic. So, if there's one thing that people tend to miss out on and they've got to get straight, what is it? And I need that from you in about a sentence, to be honest, Adrian.
Planning. 100% all about planning and preparation.
Yeah?
Yeah, so I'd obviously concur with Adrian, but talking about communication and getting your user base on board, because it is a change for them. And if you can make that change beneficial to them, which Adrian did superbly well by a bit of trick and clever, i.e. tripling their internet bandwidth at the same time and saying, well, as part of the cloud project, you can now browse the internet 3 or 5 times faster. So you get very little resistance from the user base. So that's really important, get the user base on board, so get out in their faces very early on.
Sneaky, they know what you've done now, because they can
all helps.
Yeah. Dale, what do you reckon?
Well, I'd echo both of those, and just add, know what you're trying to achieve, and don't be led by the cloud provider's agenda.
Don't let them have it all their own way,
exactly.
Even though they've got to have it some of their own way, because that's how the thing works.
Yeah, but really know what you're after. I mean, that comes through really strongly from this story.
Right, so, Dale, for them, is it genius or crazy, do you reckon, then, Cloud? So it's nearly Easter, so I've got presents for you before we go. And,
Genius if you do it right.
Yep. Who wants the mini eggs Easter egg?
Oh, mini egg's my favourite.
Yeah, all of these got little mugs with them.
Wow.
Who's the cream egg Easter egg?
That'll be me.
That'll be you. Which means, Dale, you get the Glee Easter egg. There we go. So yeah,
I know someone who's going to be.
I tell you what, I was looking for Postman Pat Easter eggs. He's not so popular anymore since they did for him on that Specsavers advert. No one wants to know him. Guys, thank you very much for all your questions. I had to sort of put all your questions together into stuff. I hope we managed to cover them all off. We'll have a look, and if we've missed any out, then Glenn's going to take care of that, because he is Mr. Client Service. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us today. I thought that was terrific. Hope you did as well. Let us know what you think, and join us again for our next Regcast. I've been Tim Phillips. Goodbye.